Morning, everybody. Welcome to SCAG's Extreme Heat Mitigation Toolbox Tuesday. My name is Kim Clark, and I'm a planning supervisor for resource conservation and resilient communities here at SCAG. Today, we will have 3 speakers to present on local, regional, and statewide resources for extreme heat mitigation. Here's our 3 speakers: Aaron Coots from the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative, Maya Long from SCAG, Civic Spark Fellow, and Braden Kay from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. So some logistics. This meeting will be an hour and a half long. The meeting is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be available on the SCAG website. We'll also send out the slides to folks who registered for this meeting after our session. During the presentations, participant lines will be muted. There will be a question and answer session after each presentation, so please hold your questions or type them in the chat. And all presentations will be emailed, as I mentioned, to those who registered. Before we get started with our meeting, we at SCAG acknowledge that we are living, working, recreating, and taking space on stolen Indigenous land. SCAG's Los Angeles office sits on the land of the Chumash, Tongva, and Kizh people. We recognize that the tribes are still here, and we are committed to lifting up their stories, cultures, and communities. You can visit a great resource, native-land.ca, to explore where you are physically in relation to Indigenous lands. Today's session will be focused on extreme heat mitigation resources to support local efforts in the SCAG region. We are very excited to be welcoming 3 speakers with expertise on this topic, as I mentioned. First, Aaron Coots will be presenting on LARC's Extreme Heat Information Campaign. Aaron is the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability, commonly known as LARC. Based at UCLA, Aaron facilitates LARC's network of climate practitioners from city and county government, businesses, nonprofits, and academia. She helps LARC members maximize limited resources, identify funding opportunities, access locally relevant research, engage in state policy, and advance local climate planning efforts. For 2 summers, LARC has drawn together a diverse set of organizations to create and share information about extreme heat in Los Angeles. Aaron will speak to us today about their efforts to co-create content and outreach strategies for the summer of 2023. Our next speaker will be Maya Long. Maya is a Civic Spark Fellow here at SCAG, building capacity for the Sustainable and Resilient Development team, primarily working on climate-resilient urban forestry research. Other projects she is involved in at SCAG include updating the Green Region Initiative Indicators, which is an interactive web tool that allows the Southern California region to compare important climate action and adaptation metrics. She graduated from UC Berkeley with a BA in political science, and Maya will be presenting on SCAG's new urban forestry resource. Our final speaker is Braden Kay. Braden is the new Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program Manager at California's Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and recently he was the founding Sustainability and Resilience Director for the city of Tempe in Arizona. Braden has also held sustainability program manager positions at the city of Tempe, Arizona State University, and the city of Orlando. Braden received a PhD in sustainability from Arizona State University and a BA in American Studies from Carleton College in Minnesota. Today, Braden will be presenting on OPR's upcoming Extreme Heat Grant Program. And with that, I'll pass it to Aaron. And thank you again for joining us here today.
Thank you, Kim. It's really great to be here with you all. As Kim mentioned, my name is Aaron Coots. I am the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability. I use she, her pronouns. While slides get queued up, I'm going to take a moment to, before I start talking about our Extreme Heat campaign. Perfect. To give you a little bit of background about LARC and frame the issue of extreme heat in Southern California. Perfect. So LARC is a network of climate leaders from across LA County. It was founded in 2007 and is housed at the University of California, Los Angeles. We have members from throughout the region, from city and county governments, from the utilities, from nonprofits, from academia, and from the private sector as well. As Kim mentioned, we help members identify and partner on climate funding opportunities, share best practices, and new research and resources. We facilitate bi-monthly member meetings to support collaboration between jurisdictions and agencies and departments. We encourage folks on the call today. Let's see, we've got about 30 folks on the call. Encourage you to join SCAG and being a LARC member and support this type of collaboration. We keep membership dues really affordable. There is a table of annual dues at laregionalcollaborative.com/join. If you would like to join our next meeting in September before committing, you can RSVP to that meeting at laregionalcollaborative.com/LARC-member-meetings. My email address is on the last slide if you have any questions about membership. I'd be glad to chat. And can I get a thumbs up or a camera on and a thumbs up physically if you are not from Los Angeles? Good for me to know who's in the room here. Do we have folks from? I saw one thumbs up. And does that mean everybody else is from LA? All right, I see another raised hand. So for folks who are not from Los Angeles, LARC is one of 8 regional collaboratives in the state. So if you're calling in from outside of LA, encourage you to check out the regional collaborative that's operating in your area. If you're joining from Ventura County, our counterpart is the Central Coast Climate Collaborative, and folks from San Bernardino, Riverside, and Imperial. Check out either the LARC website or the ARCO website here for a link to ISC3, are the folks working in your region. The project that I'm talking about today is an example of how these regional collaboratives help local governments and community-based organizations maximize our limited resources, sort of avoid some duplication that can happen in the climate planning realm. Before I get into talking about the campaign, I'd like to give you a little bit of overview about what extreme heat looks like in Southern California, what projections look like for extreme heat. LA County is projected to have 10 times as many heat waves every year by mid-century. The way that scientists measure mid-century, that's as soon as 13 years from now. My young children will still be in high school when that happens. I personally live in the Westwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, near UCLA, and the impact in my area is not going to be extreme. The projections are about 12 days above 90 by mid-century. But in other parts of the region, Antelope Valley, for instance, where today the temperatures are above 100 and temperatures hit 110 degrees at the Lancaster Airport this weekend. They are looking at 140 days above 90. And we've all experienced it. As you move farther from the coast, it gets hotter. Does anyone know what the projections are for the Coachella Valley? You can drop it in the chat or raise your hand. I'll give you a second if you'd like to play along. And if you don't know, it's looking like 214 days above 90 for the cities of Indio and Chino. That's 7 months out of the year with temperatures above 90. And hot days are more than uncomfortable. There are cascading impacts from extreme heat. A quick sidebar on cascading impacts. If you are in Los Angeles County and are thinking about doing a climate vulnerability assessment, LA County's CVA has a really good description of cascading impacts from climate change. And if you're thinking about working on a vulnerability assessment for your city, we'd be glad to share those resources in the chat. Either the resources to the county's plan or SCAG's adaptation toolkit is also fantastic. So the gist from that county report is that we're using more energy on hot days, the grid gets overloaded, we have rolling blackouts. And the impact of that is that it can impact our transit system and then folks can't get to work. Under the current conditions, heat and humidity in Metro Los Angeles are causing almost $5 billion in lost output due to worker productivity in a typical year. And it's not just the financial impacts. Folks who rely on electricity to keep medications cold or to run medical devices are at even higher risk of heat-related illness. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that heat risk looks like. This is UCLAheatmaps.org is a statewide resource showing that on an average day in Los Angeles County, an average heat day, apologies, Los Angeles County has 1,500 excess ER visits for heat-related problems. The heat is the deadliest weather-related event in the United States, but the health impacts for heat are concentrated among the elderly, low-income, Black, Hispanic, Latino, and homeless populations. Residents who work in construction, agriculture, or other outdoor occupations have a higher risk as well. There are higher rates of hospitalizations and emergency room visits during heat events. This map also demonstrates the unequal impact that you can see here, that neighborhoods in South Los Angeles will send an additional 20 to 30 people to the emergency room on a heat day, compared to 2 additional people just a few miles away in wealthier neighborhoods. So we have major investments that we need to make to cool our neighborhoods, our homes, and our schools. I hope that everyone here on the call is thinking about ways to decrease heat risk when you're applying for some of the new state and federal funding that's coming down the pipeline. Residents need more access to water, shade, places to rest on hot days. And I'm looking forward to hearing Braden's presentation about OPR's Extreme Heat Grant Program. I hope that we'll have some time to hear some feedback from you all as well on how you hope to invest in dollars in your cities. In the meantime, there is work that we can do right now to help keep our communities safe from extreme heat. And this is why we have created a social media campaign, some printable flyers to be used at public events, and a bus advertisement to run on LA Metro buses. I'm going to show you all of this content in a moment, but I just want to take a moment to thank all of the outreach partners. This is just a handful of the folks that were involved in creating the content. I'll talk a little bit more about the distribution partners in a moment. So huge thanks to the half dozen community-based organizations and LA County's Chief Sustainability Office and LA City's Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, and the Department of Public Health, who have sort of informed and collaborated and supported this work. Let's get into showing you all some content. So our social media campaign was created in partnership with the LA County Department of Public Health, which is the public health department for all of the cities in the LA region, except for Pasadena and Long Beach, which have their own public health departments. The goals of the campaign were threefold: raise awareness about the connection between climate change and public health, raise awareness about the risks of extreme heat, provide resources for staying cool, accessing utility assistance program, and improving an energy efficiency. The following 5 slides you'll see will show you a little bit of that social media content that we've created. So there are a total of 16 posts that have been vetted through the LA County Department of Public Health to be sure that we are communicating clearly and in plain language. We are sharing a variety of simple tips, or as DPH likes to call them, health protective strategies. And then also reminders that health impacts us in a variety of ways. It's not just our physical health that we talk about here, but it's also our mental health. And we did a pretty good job of making sure that we were sharing strategies that would work for folks, regardless of where they were, and their access to resources. So this post here is talking about cooling down without air conditioning. You'll notice that it's in Spanish. All of the content was translated into Spanish by our friends and partners at Climate Resolve. And then once we had a solid set of content, thank you, Saysad. We worked with a set of partners to get the word out. We realized as we were working with our partners that a number of them wanted to co-brand the material. So most of our graphics leave space for organizations and cities to add their logos as well. The idea behind LARC is that we're reducing the duplication of efforts, and providing shared content is one way that we can reduce that duplication, and making sure that this content works for a variety of cities. A little bit more here, you can see a few more tips for high-risk populations, and I'll pause here and talk a little bit about our distribution strategy. That we, to date, have more than 75 organizations, local governments and nonprofits, and a few academics who have signed up to be distribution partners. And what this means is that they have gone on our website and they have filled out the partner sign-up form. Kim, thank you for sharing that in the chat. And they've said, I'd like a regular update from you all to know when LARC is posting and when DPH is posting. And I'll also share this content on my social media channels. You can go at your own pace. All of the content is available already on our website, so you can slot it into wherever it works within your social media calendars, or you can follow along with us. For those who are following along with us, we try to make sharing content as easy as possible. We have that distribution list. We send a weekly email with a link both to the high resolution images and the captions. And then we also send a link to live posts. We found that a number of our partners actually prefer to reshare rather than creating original posts. So we try to make it a light lift for your social media managers. If they are interested in learning more before signing up, they are welcome to connect with me. My email is in the chat. It's ecoots@ucla.edu. We are all about making this as easy as possible for folks to get the word out. And we're delighted every time that we see it out in the wild. So thank you to everybody who's been sharing. Here in slide form are the same links that are in the chat, a link to our website, and to the partner sign up form to see a content calendar. If you want to see what we've shared already this summer, you can access that shared document. Also on that content calendar, you will see content from LA City's Climate Emergency Mobilization Office. If you're in LA City or you're interested in sharing LA City's content, they have a bunch of content as well. That's fantastic. I highly recommend having a look at that stuff too. And if you know of anybody else we should invite, please consider connecting us. All right. Building on that social work, we were hearing from partners saying the social is great, but there's some folks who aren't on social media. And so we worked with a number of community organizations to produce a set of 3 flyers that could be used at in-person events. A number of the organizations had promotora de salud programs or community health worker programs. And they're interested in having a resource that when they are going door to door, talking with neighbors about possibly other health issues or extreme heat, that they have a resource available to them. One of the things that was interesting in developing these flyers collaboratively was that each organization had a slightly different request. They said, we'd like you to include this, or, oh no, definitely don't include that. And our solution to that was to sort of go forward with what we felt like was important to share, talking about what the signs of heat stroke are and what to do about it, talking about some risks and some tips, sharing what to do on a hot day if you're staying home or if you're going outside. But if we covered what we felt like was sort of generally acceptable to most people, but we knew we weren't going to get it right for everybody. And so while these were originally designed in Adobe Illustrator, our partners were saying we don't have access to that tool. And so in the end, we redesigned them in PowerPoint. So these files are available at laregionalcollaborative.com/heat as both PDFs if you don't need to change them, if you just wanted to add your logo to them and share them, or if you wanted to change them, they're downloadable and editable as PowerPoint files. And they're in both English and Spanish as well. So that's the set of flyers that we've created so far. There is another that's in the works, focused on healthcare workers, specifically doctors and emergency room doctors. We have been having conversations with a number of hospitals and also healthcare providers who care a lot about climate change. And we're hearing that there's a lot of underreporting of heat illness. And so we've created another flyer that we can use to sort of do some outreach to doctors working in the ER setting, saying, hey, when you see a case of cardiac arrest, or if you see somebody with elevated enzymes in their liver, it might actually be related to heat stress. And so by increasing the reporting, there's like specific codes that doctors can enter. I've learned this. By increasing the reporting of a heat-related illness, we can help the state track how much of a problem this is. So we're trying to also get a better handle on the correct counts for extreme heat illness. And our final piece of PSA, public service announcement, is a bus advertisement. We've worked with LA Metro, has been a great partner. They are putting a bus ad on every bus in their system, which is like 2,300 buses for the months of July through September. If you are not an LA Metro in their system, and you have your own transit system and would like to adopt this image for your buses, let me know. We'd be glad to share it. And if you see this bus in the wild on an LA Metro bus, please snap a picture and share it on social media with the hashtag HeatSafeLA, or email me a copy. We would be delighted to see it. And I'm going to pause there and ask if you all have any questions on the campaign. And I love taking this opportunity to hear if you are doing any related work. Or if there are other resources that you could use. I know we'll be joined by OPR in a little while to talk about their extreme heat program. So I'm curious to hear what other resources you would like to see available, possibly through that program. Welcome to raise your hand, unmute, drop in the chat. All right.
Let's see. I'm not seeing any questions, Erin, but I do have a question. Are you finding that the content is being used more predominantly in languages other than English? Or are you finding that the content is kind of more, popular in the English language?
It's a great question. We have talked to some folks about possibly doing other languages. Right now we have English and Spanish. And the clicks and the interactions and engagement does seem to be higher on the English content. And that's like side by side if the same organization shares it first in English and then in Spanish. It's often a little higher on the English. And that could be that's a predominantly English speaking, like most of the content on our channels, on city channels, is in English. And so that might not be where people who speak other languages are initially, is my guess.
And we have a couple of questions in the chat as well, from Eileen Chin. Do these resources include a list of cooling centers?
It's a great question. We do have one that is on cooling centers, and we link to the DPH website, which I think is ready.la County. We have a post on that. It doesn't actually have a list of all of the cooling centers, though simply links out to another resource.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. I asked because we've had a little bit of trouble trying to find a comprehensive list of cooling centers. Like we'll find like a resource that only has the county ones, for example, but then like cities will have their own. So like it's just hard to find. I didn't know if maybe you had a list or something of all of them.
It's piecemeal. I totally agree with you on that. I know that the state of California actually just released a resource today. And I think that they may be linking out to a site that has cooling centers. Let me look that up and see and I'll drop it in the chat when I find it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Erin.
Yeah. And then
We have another question from Karina, and she is actually in Spokane, Washington, and wondering if they'd be able to use LARC's resources as well, particularly because they are partnering with the Spokane Regional Health District and capacity is limited to work on these kinds of visually engaging graphics. Absolutely.
Karina, we worked with the County of Santa Clara Public Health Department. They were also interested in adapting this content. Karina, would you like to send me an email? My email is in the chat. It's ecoutts@ucla.edu.
And I'm not seeing other questions in the chat or hands raised.
I see one in the Q&A. Says, we are doing a shaded/heat reducing placemaking project in Koreatown. Can you connect us with partners that could support installation of physical elements for this project? Or are your partners related to education and campaigns only? We're happy to incorporate your information in our project when it launches in a year. Amazing. Cool. I know this was an anonymous question, but I think I might need a little bit more information about what type of physical elements you're thinking about installing. We certainly know folks who are working, thinking that USGB CLA might be a good place to ask for this. This is the US Green Building Council, Los Angeles. They've got a good network of folks who are thinking about physical construction, shade trees in the planters, furnishings, and etc. they're looking for. Yeah, send me an email and I'll see if I can share a question with that US Green Building Council group, and see if they can help out. Thanks. Cool.
Well, great.
And then I see one more in the chat. I see that Braden, would you like to take credit for sharing Cal OES's cooling center list?
Oh, yeah, I'll just put it in the chat for everyone, given the earlier question there. Thanks, Erin.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you guys for your questions. I'm going to go back just to do one last reiteration of, if you have partners who are interested in sharing either physical content or on social media content, please sign up here. If you know of others who'd be interested, please connect us. Lovely to be here with you. Thanks all.
Great. Thanks very much, Erin, for sharing those resources. We look forward to hearing more from local jurisdictions who would like to utilize this important and valuable resource and are happy to connect you. Let's see, we have our next presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maya. I'm the Civic Spark Fellow at SCAG, working on urban heat mitigation projects. So that will be what my present will be on today as well. So while we wait for presentation, thank you, Jennifer. Today, I will be covering some best practices relating to climate resilient urban greening and resources that you can use to help build urban greening programs in your locality. We will also be talking about a SCAG resource hub that's now finally live that we hope will serve as the one-stop shop for cities to learn about best practices in creating a climate resilient urban greening program. So by climate resilience, we're talking about how to take into account the changes in temperatures, precipitations, etc., that urban greening programs should consider so that we have urban forests that will survive until the end of the century. And by urban greening, we're talking about efforts to plant more trees in developed areas to combat extreme heat. So think street trees and parks in your city. Here are some things we will be covering today. We will be covering what urban heat is, why it's important to think about, some challenges facing the SCAG region in the upcoming century, how climate resilient urban greening can serve as a key tool for climate adaptation, and in particular, addressing SCAG's region's challenges. We will be doing an overview of the new page on SCAG's website that will serve as a resource hub for you and how to use this page. So for a quick overview of urban heat, when we're talking about urban heat, we're talking about two things. One is the rising extreme heat that's happening right now. Extreme heat is the leading cause of climate change related deaths in the US and will be expected to get worse and more frequent in the future. And by urban, we mean developed areas. Urban areas are at even a greater risk for suffering from extreme heat. And this is due to the urban heat island effect, where the built environment leads to higher temperature in urban areas than in non-urban areas. So think about the asphalt that's reflecting light and heat onto the surrounding area versus a permeable surface where trees are growing. Formerly redlined areas and economically disadvantaged areas are also at increased risks for extreme heat deaths that are compounded by urban heat island effects. Heat waves are already occurring much more frequently than in the past and will be projected to be much more frequently in the future within this decade. There are multiple ways to combat extreme heat. Cooling centers is one. In this presentation, we will be focusing on urban greening and in particular, climate resilient urban greening. So not just thinking about today, but the temperatures of tomorrow as it relates to how plants can survive. And then when we're talking about challenges facing the SCAG region and shifting climate patterns, we're talking about extreme heat and more drought patterns in some areas, and also rising sea level and shifting precipitation patterns or rainfall that can lead to more flooding in other areas. Within this new reality, urban greening can play a really key role in adapting to the new reality of increasingly intense weather patterns. Climate resilient urban greening can provide other community benefits such as improved mental health, reduced air pollution, shade and lower temperature, comfort for active transportation such as walking and biking, as well as energy savings due to lower heat in surrounding areas, reduction in stormwater runoff, reducing GHG emissions, and reducing vehicles miles traveled, essentially how much people are using cars and other modes of transportation that is not walking, biking, rolling, and using public transportation. This is the new resource page that Kim has pasted in the chat. This is where most of our resources will be housed that we will cover in this presentation. And this programs. These are the directions of, if you're not using the link, how to find this page. So if you go onto SCAG's website, go to our work, programs and projects, sustainability, climate change, you will find this page. So the directions will be here and the presentation will be sent out after the meeting. Now I just want to go over some best practices for urban forestry and where you can find more resources to enact these best practices on SCAG's new resource page. To ensure that trees will grow to full maturity and be able to provide full benefits to communities, it's crucial that tree planting and management programs should follow these best practices. The first one would be ensuring that the right species is planted where there will not be a conflict, things that could lead to early removal, such as conflicts with infrastructure, think electricity, and other new developments that could be happening. So tree planting programs should conduct a site-specific evaluation to evaluate whether it's the right tree for the right place. Trees also need adequate soil to grow big and provide large canopies for cities, which is ultimately what we want. Tree planting programs should also plan for tree care. This includes pruning and watering for the first 10 years or until the trees grow to full maturity. A lot of urban trees after planting are left to grow using rainfall or precipitation alone. And this could really undercut the potential success of the program because we want trees to grow to full maturity so that they can provide all of the benefits to communities. Tree planting programs should also consider a high degree of diversity in the urban forest. This can ensure that urban forests have some resiliency collectively to diseases and pests should a family of tree is susceptible to a disease. This is a screenshot I've taken from one of the tools we will be going over today called the Urban Tree Inventory. And this is a screenshot from Ventura County. So using this tool, you can see the species distribution of Ventura County. Tree planting programs should also make sure to engage and collaborate with local communities. This needs to be coupled with effective plan for tree care years after planting. Some programs have failed to the lack of engagement and buy-in from local communities, or trees are left for residents' care while they get no compensation or support. So right here on our new SCAG webpage on climate resilient urban greening best practices, there are multiple tabs that you can go through, and the arrow is pointing to where exactly you can find more information on best practices and resources to enact these best practices. Cities should also consider creating their own urban greening management plans or tree ordinances. An urban forest management plan is a roadmap that creates a shared vision for the future of the urban canopy. So it is a comprehensive plan that sets the stage for how the city or county is going to take care of the urban canopy. And then a tree ordinance can be a standalone ordinance or incorporated into an urban forest management plan that establishes standards and authorization for addressing a wide range of issues regarding trees, such as if they are planted in these areas, what are the conditions that need to be met in order for that tree to be removed, for example. These are what examples of urban forest management plans look like, and examples of sections for a tree ordinance. So you can find all of these resources on our new SCAG resource hub on this topic if you go to City Tree Ordinance. Now heading into talking about tree planting in a changing climate, when we're talking about the reality that urban forests will face due to climate change, we will be experiencing increasing temperatures across cities, different rainfall patterns, disease frequencies due to changing environmental factors, and all of these things will put our urban canopies at risk. What we're saying is that a lot of the urban trees that are now in SCAG region, think LA County, San Bernardino County, they might not be okay by mid or end of century due to changing environmental factors. Please note that research into climate resiliency for urban trees is still in its early stages, and there are a lot of information gaps on how climate change will impact tree survival rates. However, there are some key things to consider when creating your climate resilient urban greening plans. First of all, you want to really understand your locality's specific climate hazards by mid to end of century. What the new air temperature will look like, rainfall, whether you will have increased flooding hazards. And then this can inform factors when forming your new tree list, when carrying out tree planting programs. You might consider things such as for tree characteristics, low water requirements, if you're going to be in a locality with increasingly more drought patterns and extreme heat issues. Or you might be selecting trees with high salinity tolerance. This is especially important in SCAG region as a lot of the water we use are recycled water, and due to the treatment process, they have a higher salinity level than regular water. You also might be looking at trees with tolerance to multiple water levels or soil moisture levels. And we have resources that we will be talking about where you can identify some of these trees or help streamline this process for you. For some resources that can help you understand your local community risks due to climate change, I want to highlight the first resource is called Risk Factor, and it allows you to see the projected risk factors in your city, including flood, extreme heat, fire, and wind factors. So here, for example, I've put in Imperial City, California. It says that by mid-century, Imperial will have extreme heat. And then it also defines in several ways what this looks like. It is usually quantified as something along the lines of number of days above a certain degree. So that could be above 90 degrees, above 100 degrees, and you can sort accordingly. And I explore you to explore this tool. I encourage you to explore this tool on your own, as we will be going over a lot of different tools today. I've put in Santa Monica here for flood factors to better understand how flood will impact Santa Monica in the future as an example. Another tool that is very good for understanding your local reality due to climate change by mid to end of century is called CalAdapt. And it lets you see average annual maximum and minimum temperatures, average annual precipitation, and you can sort it by cities, counties, congressional districts, and other boundaries. Here's what the tool looks like. And for both of these tools, you can find it on our new resource page under Planting Trees in the Changing Climate. And then here are some tools that can help you identify priority areas for urban greening and tree planting. So as we've mentioned earlier, there are some areas that are at greater risks for extreme heat related deaths and compounded by urban heat island effects. So particularly formerly redlined areas and economically disadvantaged areas. So the first tool I wanted to point out is the USDA Forest Service Tree Canopy Data Tool. It uses geospatial technology to overlay tree canopy coverage data with ozone and PM 2.5 pollution information, Cal EPA's Urban Heat Island Index, and other public health indicators. It uses data from Earth Define, which normally you have to pay for, but this is publicly available on the USDA website. Here's what it looks like as I zoom in. The next tool that is similar to this is called California Healthy Places Index Extreme Heat Edition. And this is also a map that shows data on social conditions that drive health, such as education, economic opportunities, clean air and water, and other indicators. This is what it looks like. And as you can see, you can sort by days above a certain degree by a certain timeline. So 2050 or whatnot. And then another resource I want to highlight is called the California Urban Forest Inventory. This is a very new tool that we just found out about from the Urban Forest Ecosystem Institute from Cal Poly. They look specifically at this topic we're talking about, which is climate resilient urban forestry. So they've created this tool that has 7 million trees in California, and includes public data from cities and private organizations. It is a new resource that's not currently on the Resource Hub page, but the link will be on this presentation and sent out after the meeting. Here's a quick look. You can see it being broken down by species and genus, family. You can search by counties. And then from the same Urban Forest Ecosystem Institute, there's the Urban Tree Detector, which is very similar to the USDA Forest Service canopy data, but they use a different process for identifying urban trees. And also from this tool, we now know what percentage of trees in a certain locality is planted on public or private land, which is not an information that we've had in the past. Here I've linked a more in-depth tutorial of the Urban Tree Detector, and also this is the same link where you can find more in-depth tutorial of the Urban Tree Inventory if you wish to learn more about it, since we will be going over a lot of slides today. And this is where on our resource hub, you can find these resources for identifying priority areas for tree planting. So we've covered a lot, but now how to select the trees that will do well in the near future. I want to point you out, I want to point you to these two presentations by experts. The first one is called New Tools from the Urban Forest Ecosystem Institute. It's actually a collection of multiple presentations and is around 1 hour total. So they do a more in-depth discussion on the process of creating climate resilient tree palettes as they would do it as researchers. And then there's also a presentation on this topic by a researcher from UC-ANR, Igor Lakin, that uses a similar space for time substitution process that you can potentially replicate for your city to identify tree species for your city's future climate. But essentially, the main method is that if you can look at a certain tree species and where it normally occurs, as in its native range, using the data that we have, so we can't go back all the way to Earth's founding, but for the timeline that we have and that we know of, where does the species usually occur? And then if you can look at the future climate factors of around that area and you can find the overlap between where this tree species currently live and the future climate, then you've identified the area where the species can potentially do very well right now and also into the upcoming century. So these are slides I've taken from the presentation from Dr. Natalie Love from the Urban Forest Ecosystem Institute, using an example of the Atlas cedar. So this tree, for example, if you look at the map on the left, it has a high suitability in a lot of areas in green. But by 2040 or 2070, because of increasing temperature, most likely it will be suitable for the coastal regions only. And then another resource I want to point out to you is this paper, which is a joint collaboration between UCLA School of Public Affairs and Tree People. So they've kind of gone over this process and created their own climate-ready trees, a list of 28 of them for the LA region. So they took into considerations things such as drought tolerance, water demand, pest resistance, and salinity tolerance, and have come up with this list. In the previous slide, I've identified the page so that you can find this list. So if you want kind of a shortcut in your planting tree programs for the LA region, this could be a really good list to get started with. And then a similar tool would be the Green Schoolyards of America, California Tree Palettes. So they focus primarily on schoolyards and trees that will be appropriate for a schoolyard setting. They have identified climate resilience in trees by sunset climate zones in California. And this is what their tool looks like. It also allows you to find your school's sunset zone or any locality's sunset zone for that matter, and then be able to find the tree palettes for that sunset zone. So they've already taken into consideration the changing climate of this zone for the near future. And then one of the last tools I want to highlight is called Select Tree. So this is also created by a researcher from the Urban Forest Ecosystem Institute from Cal Poly named Matt Ritter, and it allows you to search California trees by different characteristics. And you can also search by the name of the tree that you know, so not necessarily the scientific name, but the name that you know of it. And you can select by whether it's native or non-native, height, tree shape, etc. And the database right now contains around 2,000 tree species. And they're also developing an addition to the website where you can find nurseries where you can buy these trees, because that's also one of the difficulties with planting climate resilient trees is that some species, native plant nurseries might not carry, or plant nurseries might not know that there's a demand for these species, so they will not start them. But if there's demand, this hopefully the tool can grow so that it contains a list of nurseries where you can buy trees and also request trees as well. A similar list, but but much smaller is called Climate Ready Trees. And this is a joint project between US Forest Service and UC Davis. It highlights a small number of trees that may be particularly suited to tolerate stressors of a changing climate in different California regions. So here I've clicked on Southern California region, coastal region, and the mulga tree is the first one that pops up. So this is also a good starting point to look at different trees that you might consider in your urban canopy. It is a much smaller list than the previous resources like the Tree People paper and Green Schoolyards of America resources that I've just mentioned, but you can explore these tools more in depth. And then I also really want to highlight something called Climate Assessment Tool. So this is really great for if you have, let's say, a park in your city and it has a number of trees, you know what the species are, and you want to see what, how can they really survive in the near future? What is its ability to, that we know for it to survive in the new temperature that you have of your city? So if here, what I've done is I've put in the scientific name of the species. This is the Southern Magnolia, also called Magnolia grandiflora. I've put in the latitude and longitude of a place in West LA near the Grove, and emission scenario as limited emissions in the year 2050. So it can provide with different calculations methods, whether this species is known to occur with the new temperature that we are expected to have by 2050 with limited fossil fuel emissions. And then this is the same species and the same location, but I've put in business as usual when it comes to emissions. And as you can see, because of increased temperature, even in comparison to the limited emissions scenario, this species is much less known to occur in the new temperature that we would have by 2050. So if you combine several of these tools together, such as the California Urban Tree Inventory that we've just mentioned, where you can put in a county, you can find the percentage of trees that are in that county. The Southern Magnolia here, for example, I've come up with a species using the Urban Tree Inventory, and this species take up 4.7% of the urban canopy in LA County, for example. You can use these tools together to kind of identify and see what kind of risks are your urban canopy really being exposed to due to climate change in the to mid to end of century. And so I encourage you to look at these resources more in depth to get a better understanding of the risks of your local climate, the risks present to urban trees in your city, and to come up with a new list of trees that may be adapted to a changing climate. And again, you can find these resources on our new resource hub that's pasted in the chat, and also on this presentation after it's sent out. Here is another look at the same resource. This is a table where you can find, on the left-hand side is what you're trying to find, and the use for on the right-hand side. And then before I end this presentation, I do want to address a question of native versus non-native trees. This is a question I've come across in my research, and I'm sure a lot of us have heard about how important planting native is as a thing that we hear a lot about urban forests. So when we are creating new tree pellets that will withstand the future climate for your urban canopies, in my talk to experts and interviews in this respect, I've learned that not many native trees are known to survive at temperatures and conditions that we will expect to have in the future due to climate change. And when you're talking about native plants, that is a small list of plants here in California. And then when you're talking about native trees in particular, so not shrubs and flowers, but trees, that list of native trees is even smaller. And so it is important that cities' tree palettes include trees, native and non-native, that will that can be considered for the ability to withstand the future climate. And in here, I've linked to the presentation I've talked about from the Urban Forest Ecosystem Institute, where the researchers addressed this exact question in the Q&A. And I've put in the minutes where you can find that Q&A and see how these researchers answer this question. Here is a list of experts that I've either spoken to, helped inform the creation of this new resource, or I've heard about that could provide expert knowledge on certain aspects such as landscaping or climate resilience, urban planning. And now that is it for the experts list. And thank you so much for listening. You can get in touch with me and Kim Clark, the planning supervisor for this department, at these emails, and the presentation will be sent out after the meeting. I will now be taking questions as we have a few minutes for that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maya. Such an informative resource that SCAG is very proud to be hosting on our website. Let's see. Checking if there's any questions, and folks, feel free to also unmute yourselves and ask questions directly to Maya. Let's see, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So I have a question for you, Maya. Or actually, let's defer to Gail Sheehan-Little-Lord. Gail, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Kim. First of all, Maya, that was an excellent presentation. And I know many of us can't wait to get into the website and take a look at the resources and tools. One question that I have, and it's a situation where I, as a property owner, are dealing with, is we are dealing with defensible space as well, because we are in, high fire hazard areas. Do any of the materials that you are posting also make available information about defensible space, so that as people and institutions and jurisdictions are planting more trees, they also are sensitive to defensible space requirements, so that we don't create more of a fire hazard opportunity as well?
Hi, Gail. Thanks for that question. So no, none of the resources I've mentioned here talk about defensible space in particular, but I can point you to a few other resources, primarily from UC Master Gardeners. They are a great organization that talk about defensible space and how you can plant a lot of trees for the urban canopy, even on private property. And also take into account defensible space issues. So I can paste some of that resources in the chat.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
And again, a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gail, for your question. We'll pause to allow other folks for just a minute or so to chime in or enter your questions in the chat. Okay, seeing no other questions, thanks very much, Maya, for sharing the lessons that you've learned, as well as your expertise in this area. Moving on to our final speaker, who is Braden Kay. Braden is the new Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program Manager at the Governor's Office of Planning Research for the state of California. Braden, take us away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you all for being here today. I want to walk you through just briefly our ICARP program at OPR and the climate grant programs that are available, all of which can be used to move forward resilience to extreme heat and heat relief work. And then specifically, let you know a little bit about our brand new Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Program and some of the funding that's going to be coming forward that'll be available for both planning and implementation work. So There are three, oh, there we go. There are three grant programs that are coming out of the climate team at the Office of Planning and Research. There's my program, the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Grant Program. Right now, there's a grant open from the Regional Resilience Grant Program. And then our team has just awarded the first round of grantees for the Adaptation Planning Grant Program. And so I'll just briefly go over these three grant programs. They all have slightly different purviews and things that you can use these grants for. So first, I'll start with the Regional Resilience Grant Program. It is open right now. It's meant to support local, regional, and tribal entities on regional scale solutions. There's a very flexible definition of what regional means. It needs to be at least 2 jurisdictions. And there's both a planning and a infrastructure / implementation focus to this grant program. It's for all climate risks, so you can use it for wildfire, sea level rise, drought, flood, extreme heat. Like I said before, both for planning exercises as well as for implementation exercises. So you get a little bit of a sense of the types of programs that this can fund. This is not single jurisdiction funding. Like I said, you have to have some conception of region and at least 2 jurisdictions that are involved in this grant program. Then we can get to the adaptation planning grant. This can be used for individual jurisdictions. It is only for planning. It does not have an implementation piece. They just went through their first round. There will be another round, 2 other rounds of funding, one in 2024 and one in 2025. People are using it for all sorts of plans, whether and some of them including shade equity, plans for microgrids, climate action plans, climate adaptation plans writ large. And most of these some of these are regional planning exercises and some of these are single jurisdiction planning exercises. And then comes to, and then eligible applicants and the types of activities, planning activities that can be funded through this grant. Then we can come to the grant program that's just been started in order to implement California's Extreme Heat Action Plan. There will be close to $100 million available in local, regional, and tribal heat reduction efforts. We will be, oh, and I'll switch to, can we switch to my other slide deck? So in this program, it's going to be both planning and implementation. So jurisdictions will be able to do planning and awareness campaigns, both either for sort of long-term heat resilience as well as short-term heat relief programs. So we're going to try to have a very flexible idea of what planning and awareness activities can be, and they'll be up to 30-month-long planning exercises that you can get funded this way. Our program also has the ability to fund infrastructure projects, so cool schools and cool playgrounds, cool corridors, urban greening and urban forestry projects. Perfect. So there'll really be, a flexibility in terms of the type of infrastructure that can be funded through this. So I'll run to this. So right now we've been doing listening from across the state on how we should be funding this work and what type of work we should be funding. Our grant guideline draft is going to be available later this year or later this summer. And then our hope is to have our first round of applications available this winter. So we'll have 2 rounds of funding, a 2024 funding round and a 2025 funding round. So really encourage folks to stay in touch with me. We're happy to do one-on-ones, to stay in conversation around what types of programs you need funded, what other technical assistance and assistance you need in terms of doing resilience to extreme heat work. yeah, really excited that we now have these state resources to support this work, and hopefully can grow a growing practice around heat relief and resilience to extreme heat across the state. And with that, happy to be in dialogue, take any questions.
Thanks very much, Braden. Let's see, folks, feel free to enter your questions into the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask questions directly to Braden, feel free. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I'll give folks a little bit more time for that. But in the meantime, Braden, I have a question for you, kind of following on Maya's presentation. Can you speak a little bit more about the opportunities for utilizing this funding to support nature-based solutions?
Yeah, 100%. And thanks so much for asking that question, Kim. So yeah, so both our funding will be available both for funding planning around nature-based solutions, as well as actually funding nature-based solution projects. So, you know, so our funding will be meant to be able to fund a variety of extreme heat infrastructure, including nature-based solutions. So if you want to apply for doing nature-based solutions at a school or as part of a transportation project or in your local parks, or potentially even a type of proposal that is nature-based solutions on private property, whether you want to pilot nature-based solutions in a particular neighborhood, or as a part of a new development. Like we're hopeful to be pretty flexible on funding infrastructure solutions around nature-based solutions. Another pitch I want to make on the planning side is there is a huge opportunity to make sure that we're doing extreme heat planning that acknowledges all of the systems that need to be integrated in order to do high quality nature-based solutions work. So ideally, we would be seeing master plans at the regional, at the county, at the single jurisdiction level that are integrating stormwater planning with nature-based solutions, with extreme heat and health equity concerns, all into a single plan. We know that a lot of nature-based solution implementation has challenges with utility conflicts, has challenges with transportation conflicts, or not making the synergies that are available. So we're hoping that the planning funding that's coming from our program is allowing local jurisdictions and tribes and community-based organizations to really do that next generation thinking about not only how do we, as Maya pointed out, have the right types of plant species, but what is the accompanying infrastructure? What are some of the other coordination efforts that need to take place to really make sure that we have thriving nature-based solutions and thriving vegetation in the face of decades and decades of extreme heat? So that's going to require a lot of planning and coordination. And our hope is that our funding will be able to help communities do that work. Does that get to your question, Kim?
Yes, yeah, very thoroughly. Thanks very much. Let's see. We'll just pause for a moment before we conclude to see if there's any other questions.
Awesome. Well, oh yeah, Aaron.
Hey, Braden. I was reading LA County's park needs assessment yesterday, and it had an interesting sort of like a priority item for them, which I'll read off. I just pulled it up. One of their goals is to work with the state of California and other grantors to update scoring tools and methodologies for parks-related grant programs to address conservation and restoration regional needs, specifically looking at racial equity and population vulnerability metrics. Can you speak to the like the racial and social equity sort of metrics that you guys are thinking about using? Have you guys nailed anything down yet?
Yeah, our approach is going to be I believe our approach is going to be to remain relatively flexible around which tools that you want to use. I think in our grant program, we are going, it's still in creation, but my understanding is that we will ask you to have some kind of consideration of racial equity metrics and of health equity metrics, but we're not going to require you to use specific ones. So,
Okay.
I think that, I loved the fact that Maya was sharing CalADAPS and some of the extreme heat health indicator project. There's certainly a lot of tools and metrics that you can use to help support the creation of your projects. I think we're going to be trying to stay as flexible as possible and in terms of wanting you to be able to tell that story with data, but not requiring you using specific tools.
Okay. Will there be any, let me ask a follow-up. Will there be any sort of, I'm forgetting the word now that's often used, sort of set-asides for certain groups, or sort of regional set-asides saying we want to allocate a certain number of grants to certain number of regions?
Yeah, so like for the regional grant program, there's adaptation regions within the statewide adaptation strategy, and the regional program is going to be funding at least one project in each of those regions. At this point, we don't have particular set-asides for the extreme heat program. We are hoping, to fund lots of projects, that target the most vulnerable communities, and we'll certainly be asking you as you're developing your projects to help to let us know like who's not thriving because of extreme heat in your jurisdiction or in your region, and how does this program address that. But at this point, we're not going to be setting aside certain there's no conversation at this point about setting aside certain amounts of money for certain populations. We certainly hope to try to support some tribal applications, but at this point, we don't have any specific set-asides.
Okay. A piece of feedback for the RRGP program was that it was interesting to see sort of the set-asides of one per region for the implementation grant, which
well,
effectively,
minimum.
It was, I think it's a minimum for the planning, there's a minimum, and then there's a cap of one per region for the implementation. And so it was like, well, if you only get one in LA, the number of people that we have here served by that one implementation project.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that piece of feedback back
Cool.
with the team.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Braden, for sharing information on those upcoming resources. So what we've shared with you today overall is information on extreme heat, new tools and resources to mitigate extreme heat in your community, and then resources to actually implement those solutions on the ground. So many thanks to our speakers today, Aaron, Maya, and Braden. And again, this will be posted online for folks to use as a continuous resource. And please do check out the web pages that we've shared in the chat to get more information. So thanks everyone for joining us here today. And as always, feel free to reach out to SCAG staff for additional questions on SCAG's areas of work. And with that, we'll be concluding the session.